The whispers spread through the ballroom the moment John Lindo walked onto the polished dance floor. The overhead lights bounced off the glossy surface, stretching his tall across the stage of the Champions Jack and Jill competition. Along the edges of the room, slender, athletic competitors traded glances. Judges lifted their eyebrows. Onlookers murmured behind their hands. "Is he actually competing?" someone whispered. "This has to be some kind of stunt," another voice scoffed. Surrounded by lean, polished professionals, John looked completely out of place. Too large, too different to belong in a West Coast swing competition that attracted the country's most gifted dancers every single year. He could feel the weight of every glance, every whispered comment pressing down on him before he'd even taken his first step. But John had spent his whole life proving doubters wrong. At 10 years old, he sat quietly at his cousin's wedding, captivated as couples swept across the floor with effortless grace. Even at that age, he noticed something. Every dancer he watched shared the same slender frame, fitted suits, sleek dresses that hugged every movement. Nobody looked anything like the person John would eventually become. Even so, something took root in him that day. Through his teenage years, his love of dance grew, even as his self-doubt grew alongside it. After school, he'd push the furniture aside to clear a small patch of floor in his living room. With no teacher to guide him, he studied old VHS tapes and competition DVDs frame by frame, memorizing each step before trying it himself. "You, dancing? Sure, good luck with that." Classmates would jeer whenever they caught him rehearsing moves in the hallway. High school was brutal. He was teased for his size, and mocked even harder for wanting to dance. Yet small wins kept him going. At the winter formal, when he finally worked up the nerve to step onto the dance floor, he caught the stunned looks on his classmates' faces as they watched him move with unexpected skill. Maybe, he thought, dance wasn't out of reach after all. Maybe his body wasn't the obstacle everyone assumed it to be. By the time he reached his early 20s, John had started showing up to local West Coast swing socials. Instructors weren't sure what to make of him. His form was strong, but none of them had ever coached a dancer built like him. Some hesitated to even pair him with a partner at first, unsure how his size would translate to the connection the dance demanded. His sheer persistence slowly wore down their doubts, one practice session at a time. With every event he entered, his footwork sharpened, his spins tightened, his sense of rhythm deepened. Dance became a refuge, a place where the limits of his body seemed to disappear into pure strength. On the floor, he found something school had never given him, a sense of belonging. But the confidence he felt inside the studio didn't protect him from the judgment waiting outside it. No matter how far his skill progressed, there were always sideways looks, stares, and quiet dismissals, constant reminders that he was fighting for space in a world that never expected someone like him to claim it. Then came the moment that nearly broke him. After a strong showing at a small regional event, John overheard a cluster of fellow dancers laughing quietly as he walked past. "Yeah, he can move, but honestly, it looks absurd, like watching a bear attempt ballet. Doesn't matter how good he is. Nobody wants to watch that." Those words hurt worse than anything he'd heard in a school hallway. These weren't strangers or bullies. They were fellow dancers, people who claimed to celebrate artistry over appearance. Yet the moment it came to him, that belief seemed to vanish. For weeks, John couldn't bring himself to dance. His shoes sat untouched in the corner of his apartment while doubt took over. He replayed the laughter in his head again and again until it drowned out every reason he'd ever had for stepping onto a dance floor in the first place. Maybe they were right. Maybe no amount of effort would ever change how people saw him, a punchline instead of a real contender. Then, one night, scrolling through his phone, he came across an ad for the Champions Jack and Jill competition, the most respected event in the entire West Coast swing world. He'd never once considered entering, always assuming it was reserved for dancers who never had to fight to be taken seriously. But that night, something in him changed. Let them laugh if they wanted to, let them talk, but he'd make absolutely certain they never forgot his name. He registered that same night, not just to silence his critics, but to prove to himself that he'd never actually needed their approval to begin with. Now, beneath the blazing lights of the Grand Regency Convention Hall, John felt the pressure of 100 doubt the room, the same kind of stares that had followed him his entire life. The Jack and Jill format paired dancers randomly, testing pure improvisation. John had drawn Deborah Slay, a well-known name in the West Coast swing world, celebrated for her rapid spins and flawless precision. The two of them couldn't have looked more different, Deborah graceful and slight, John easily the biggest competitor on the floor. To the crowd, it looked less like a real matchup and more like a punchline waiting to happen. The announcer's voice cut through the room as the music started, a funky laid-back groove with a deep, rolling bass line. John reached for Deborah's hand, surprisingly gentle, and eased her into the opening steps. From the very first count, the mood in the room shifted. John moved with a grace nobody expected, his balance effortless as he guided Deborah through the routine. He wasn't just hitting steps, he was living inside the music, letting it move through him. The skeptical murmurs faded into stunned quiet. Then, as it sank in what they were watching, the silence broke into wild applause. The crowd leaned in, fully hooked. Even the judges dropped their preconceptions, scribbling notes as smiles spread across their faces. The chemistry between John and Deborah was undeniable. Every pass, whip, and spin flowed together as he moved across the floor with striking precision. Deborah trusted his lead completely, her genuine smile proving to everyone watching that this was no gimmick. This was real skill. When the DJ dropped in a sudden tempo shift, the kind that trips up even veteran dancers, John didn't hesitate. He adapted instantly, playing with the new rhythm and slipping in a playful bit where he echoed Deborah's steps before answering with a flourish of his own. She picked up on it right away, matching his energy beat for beat. The audience clapped along, carrying them forward. As the song neared its end, John pulled off a clean whip turn, sending Deborah spinning outward before catching her smoothly and lowering her into a dramatic dip that landed exactly on the final note. The room erupted. People jumped to their feet, cheering and whistling as applause thundered through the hall. Strangers who had scoffed at him only minutes earlier were now on their feet, shouting his name. John stood there, chest heaving, sweat on his brow, taking in a moment that felt like both an ending and a beginning. When the judges named John and Deborah the winners, the crowd's roar only confirmed what the performance had already made clear: that skill, heart, and determination matter more than appearance ever. Could the very people who had doubted him now cheered the loudest, their opinions completely rewritten? John Lindo's path from self-taught beginner to champion shows what's possible when perseverance outlasts prejudice. His story is a reminder that greatness can show up in the places we least expect it, wearing a body no one thought could hold it, and that daring to defy expectations can reshape not just one life, but an entire community. In the end, it wasn't only John's remarkable dancing that won the room over. It was his sheer refusal to accept the limits others tried to place on him. The moment the music started and he began to move, he didn't just prove his talent, he forced everyone watching to rethink who truly belongs on the dance floor and who belongs anywhere at all.